Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on ForgottenWeapons.com. Today I have a really cool gun here, and this may not be quite what you think it is. This is not, in fact, an STG-44. This is a Semiauto PTR44. These were made in Germany, and just a couple hundred of them were imported into the US. They're pretty much all off the market now, but we have a chance here to take a look at one, and these are pretty cool. So, as you can tell from looking at it, this is a very high quality reproduction of the Sturmgewehr, the MP44, German early assault rifle. These are still in the original caliber, 7.92 by 33 millimeter Kurz, and they have been modified to semi-auto only for the US commercial market. These ran several $1,000s. I don't know the exact price, but somewhere between $3,500 and $5,000 a piece. We're very happy to have lucked into one here that we can take a look at for you today. So the MP44, or STG-44, it goes by both names, which we'll get into in a moment, is really one of the iconic weapons of history. This was the very first practical, mass-produced assault rifle. Using that phrase in an accurate sense instead of the hyped up political sense. The idea was you had a select fire, semi-automatic or fully automatic, magazine fed weapon firing an intermediate cartridge. Something a little bigger than a pistol cartridge, but a little smaller than the standard full power rifle cartridge. The Germans did this really, really well with the STG-44. This rifle is a little heavier than something that we'd expect to use today. But in conjunction with its rather light cartridge, the 7.92 by 33 Kurz, this is a very soft shooting weapon. It's a very comfortable weapon. It's a really fun weapon to shoot. Anyone who fires one of these really enjoys it. No one comes away thinking that, oh, that was a harsh gun, that was unpleasant. No, people really like these when they get to shoot them. So developmentally, this was in development and in small-scale production in Germany, and it was called the MP44 machine pistol for 2 years, the MP43 and then the MP44 as it was incrementally developed, because Hitler wanted machine pistols. And from his experiences in World War I, he'd come to the conclusion that a machine pistol was the optimum weapon, and so that's what the Wehrmacht would develop and use. So this got developed, and in order to kind of keep the program going without annoying Hitler too much, they named it a machine pistol. And he didn't really find out about it or pay any attention to it until in 1944, congratulating one of his Eastern Front generals for doing well, asked the guy, what can we do? What can I do to help you? And the general came back and said, I want more of those MP44s. Those things are great. And Hitler's reaction was pretty much, well, what MP? What is that? And so they pulled it out, and having gotten over some of the prejudice that way, Hitler realized this was a pretty good weapon and allowed development of it, at which point the name was changed to be the more accurate STG for Sturmgewehr, or assault rifle. So let's take this apart now and just see how all the pieces come together. We're going to start by removing the buttstock. This may look kind of like an HK style rifle. That's because this really was the first of the HK style rifles. So we're going to pull this pin out. This is a little tight, and as soon as it comes off, the recoil spring kind of squirts out. The design here uses a long tube in the buttstock, a hollow drilled tube, to house the recoil spring. As a matter of fact, that's why it has this vertical cleaning kit receptacle. Now, when we look at the rest of the rifle, we have this lower assembly that nicely hinges down. This piece is actually not removable. It looks like it ought to be, and anyone who's messed with an HK will think that it ought to be removable. This is in fact a pin that has been basically riveted out on both ends. So this piece does not come off, it's captive. We have our fire control group inside. This is the semi-auto, so normally you would have a selector switch here going back and forth, and that's been fixed in place. The bolt and bolt carrier both slide right out. And that's pretty much it for basic disassembly and field stripping. There's not much else going on here. We have a lower metal handguard, which we don't need to take off. We have a gas tube here. It's just a hollow tube to house the gas piston. There's no need to take this off to do maintenance. So just for comparison's sake, we have an original STG44 lower. This is a full auto lower, and we wanted to take a look to see what was done on the PTR44 semi-auto to make sure that one of these will not, in fact, go on. You can't just interchange them. So you can see that these two housings are very similar. We have the semi-auto here and the full auto on the other side. All of the full auto parts have been removed from the semi-auto lower, and it is also slightly shorter and it is slightly wider. So there's no way you can drop on an original full auto lower. However, the changes are subtle enough that this gun is very difficult to tell apart visually. And that's what people are looking for when they're buying one of the PTR44s, is something that looks just like the original and fires, but is legal and not a machine gun. So in addition, the bolt was slightly re-engineered so that an original full auto bolt will not fit inside the receiver. The receiver is a little bit narrower. You can see here on our semi-auto bolt, this rear locking surface is slightly narrower than on the original. In order to make up for the slightly reduced locking area, there's more material in here behind to support it. Whereas on the original, it comes in and gets fairly narrow. And they can do that because the original locking surface is slightly larger. So when the gun is locked up and ready to fire, it sits like this. And this bottom surface right here is what locks in up against the trunnion in the receiver to keep everything closed during the firing process. Once gas comes through the gas port and starts pushing the piston and the bolt carrier backwards, it comes back like this, it hooks the bolt, and they both travel backwards. Recoil, or the recoil spring, after firing, pushes the bolt carrier back forward. The bolt will stop against the barrel. The bolt carrier continues a little bit, which pushes the bolt down and locks it in place. As you can see, the bolt has been pushed down by the carrier here. When I pull the handle backwards, the bolt comes up and pulled backwards. You can see it dropping down to lock right there. There is some talk of whether the Russians copied this gun when they designed the AK, because in a lot of overall respects this resembles an AK. You have the big curved magazine, you have a gas piston on top, bolt handle sticking out the side. Well, mechanically, there is very little relationship. The MP44 and the AK-47 use totally different mechanisms. The MP44, as we looked at, has a tilting bolt, whereas the AK has a rotating bolt. If anything, the AK is much more closely based on the US M1 Garand, which also has a rotating bolt. However, conceptually, I'm sure that this entered into some people's thoughts in Russia when they were designing and producing and adopting the AK. So I mentioned this was a really controllable or a really comfortable gun to shoot. Judged by today's standards, if you put this up against an AR-15, there are definitely some weaknesses to it. If we look at the controls, the safety is pretty good. We go from safe to fire, which is nice and intuitive and right under your thumb, assuming you're right-handed. The magazine is nowhere near removable from a firing position. However, with one hand, you can grasp the magazine and the release button and release these. These did use a 30-round magazine, by the way. And one other element that the German did really well designing this is just how it feels to shoulder. When we bring this up, once you get a nice good cheek rest, the sights are very nicely in line with your eye. It's a very natural gun to shoot. So despite being a little heavy and not having the best ergonomics ever, this was overall a very effective gun. And had the war not ended badly for Germany, these would have become far more prevalent. And as it in fact turned out, the concept really took over. All of today's combat rifles really owe their lineage to the STG-44 here. So hopefully we'll be able to get out to the range and do a little bit of test firing with this. There aren't a whole lot of them around, but it's still a cheaper option to get into an MP44 than finding a $20,000 original machine gun. So until then, I hope you learned something. I hope you had a good time, and thanks for watching.